I'm not gonna deal with that. I just can't just be with somebody where every time something comes up, we got to keep having a conversation later.
That's facts. That's facts. That's facts. Facts. Facts.
So you decide when we stop talking? Like, that's not how this works, right? You don't decide when we done.
That's right. I said it. Somebody's got to say it. Somebody's got to say it.
That's why I said if we're having a conversation, I will have that conversation with you. I don't mind sitting. If I'm with someone that can conversate without getting extremely upset and high tempered, then I don't mind having that conversation. I'm not going to just say, I don't want to talk about it. Let's talk about it later.
I got C.
I think women tend to try to tone police men and tell them how to talk, tell them how they should be delivering something instead of usually reading the room.
Paris, how are you when conflict arises?
Um, conflict. I'm a
What you
different
mean?
breed. I really don't care. Um, I don't really care because I know who I am, and especially when it comes to someone that I don't know, like on these social media platforms, I laugh. I don't care. I
I mean,
really don't.
within a relate like with your man within a
In
relationship.
a relationship, I don't argue. And I've ran into a problem with that before. It's because I was dating someone that is used to that type of woman, and so they kept trying to get that out of me, so they could feel validated that I really cared about them. I'm not argumentative. I'm not going to argue with you at all.
Is that is that like a power move, or is that like a concession of like, you know what, babe, you got it? Or is it like a, I'm not gonna argue, I'm gonna just walk away and I don't got time for this.
I wouldn't say I don't have time for it, but I would walk away before I feel myself, getting out of the character and wanting to be more combative with you. Because at the end of the day, I respect you. So whatever you're trying to voice your opinion, at the end of the day, I'm gonna listen to it and I'm gonna accept it. And if I have another point of view, I know when the right time to bring that up, because if we're both at high temps and we're both arguing, nobody is listening to anyone, and our both our point of views are not going to get across. So somebody has to submit and say, okay, you got it, I'm listening, I'm understanding, because I do listen to understand. And then if I have a pushback, I still know that it's not the right time because obviously he's upset right now. So I'll come back later on in another way and reiterate and talk to him about it. But it's just having that, that discernment.
Man, put a W in the chat for Paris.
Change doesn't happen overnight. So, is there ever a point where we give grace as we are getting better at communication? And so, does it ever come to a point in time where we're not walking away to have a conversation later versus us having a conversation like right then and there? I've heard you mention, and it's not just you, but so often people don't want to have a conversation because they just don't want to handle the weight that comes with that conversation. And so sometimes they never come around to having it again, or they're kind of like deflecting so that they don't get riled up. Me personally, I want to get to a point where we're able to have that conversation right then and there, like in the heat of the moment. I think that's the best time to have a conversation where we can practice the growth there versus always having to revisit it later because somebody can't deal with it.
That's true. I mean, if you have two people that can actually have a conversation, then nothing's wrong with that. But if you're with someone that is have gotten to the point where they're, loud, they're yelling, their emotions is high, then that's not a time to reason with that person. So there's no sense of going back and forth and you both getting upset and getting to the point where now it's going to escalate to something else, when you can just simmer all the way down, let that person have it for that moment, think about the situation, why that person got so upset about the situation, and then talk about it later. Like, I'm not a person that's going to sit and argue and go back and forth with you just to have a conversation if I know that this is not a conversation at this point.
But where does the
I think
growth get higher than that is what I'm saying. Because like the growth can be, okay, well, I recognize I'm not going to engage in something because it's not going to go nowhere because one of us is heated. So let's just say that you're the one that's wanting to walk away. Where does the growth grow from there? Do you get to a point where you don't have to recognize that it's getting heated? Instead, maybe you're using some different tactics to get him engaged, or maybe you're practicing some techniques where some tools that you brought in where you can actually have the conversation.
I mean, that's possible. That's learning your partner.
I just think that that's probably like the best way to move towards that growth. Because if you just constantly having to keep putting it, I'm not going to deal with that. I just can't just be with somebody where every time something comes up, we got to keep having a conversation later.
That's why I vet, and I'm trying to vet better, but I don't like being involved with people that can't control their emotions. So if every time you get upset and it has to be an argument or a debate, or we have to go back and forth, then that's not the type of person I want to be with. Why should I have to come to you and show you techniques of how to control yourself? So if you're a person that knows how to control their emotions and their feelings, and they're able to have a conversation, then I don't mind having that conversation with you. And I'm not saying every time I'm going to walk away, because sometimes it's just a conversation. If I can have a conversation with a level mind, then I will sit there and we'll talk it out. But if you're getting to the point where you're getting, loud, and, to where it's aggression or high emotion, then that shuts me down. And I no longer want to communicate because I don't know where that can escalate to, if that makes sense.
I wanted to say something about that. I think I'm right there with you, Jared. Like I wouldn't tolerate nonsense like that. People who don't know how to communicate, this doesn't work. I think that you have to match up with somebody who is able to communicate. And if you are a person who has to put off things later, you don't know how to control your emotions, you really don't deserve to be in a relationship, because you can't conduct yourself like that outside in the wild. You can't do that at the workplace. Somehow you have to find some sense of control. You have to be able to have the right temperament or you'll get fired. And you know what? Because they care enough about their job, they don't let that happen to them. So I want the same damn respect. If you're going to be able to control yourself with everybody else, then you're going to have to do that with me too. But we should be able to talk like two adults without having to scream at each other, yell at each other, disrespect each other. And if you can't do that, then yeah, you go find somebody just as toxic as you to be in a relationship with them. Don't deal with people who have that type of temperament. If they're unable to control their emotions, that's not the person for you. If you're an effective communicator, why would you waste your life on somebody who's not there?
Sometimes people like misread or what they're receiving, the information that's coming in. So they'll say, I'm not going to argue with you when it's not even an argument. It's just something that we may not disagree, we may not agree on. And because I don't agree with it, I don't get the opportunity to give the support as to why I don't agree with it. Because if the support makes logical sense, then we should roll with that. And vice versa. If you say something, I'd be like, oh, you know what, that makes sense, right? I can't argue with that. But the key is to give the support to your argument. But when they label it, I'm about to argue with you, it's like that's just a way to kind of get out sometimes from actually having a conversation.
I think what she's saying is fair, right? But here's my thing. I think she illustrated how she's more of a traditional woman, but I do think that is outside the framework of a traditional feminine woman. And I early on in my late relationship, I had to teach my woman this, like, so you decide when we stop talking. Like, that's not how this works, right? You don't decide when we done. But I early on I kind of had to deal with it, but I had to kind of teach her, like, yeah, that's not how this works. So that's the only thing that I would push back on as far as just it being feminine is like, but I understand where you're saying that you didn't, some of the guys that you were with were just a little bit emotional when it came to that. But where a woman leads is when you pick your man. That's where, in my opinion, that's where that's your opportunity to lead and make a decision, is when you pick him, and from there on, that's where he lead, right? And I think a woman deciding that this conversation is over for now is her trying to be a leader within the relationship. But I understand you saying that those men was emotional, and and you got to bet better and all that.
So let
Yeah,
me
Ma, that's a
clarify
good
that.
ass point.
So I'm not saying if that's why I said if we're having a conversation, I will have that conversation with you. I don't mind sitting if I'm with someone that can conversate without getting extremely upset and high tempered, then I don't mind having that conversation. I'm not going to just say, I don't want to talk about it. Let's talk about it later. No, I'm not going to do that. I will sit there and have that conversation with you. But the moment that you get into your emotions and passionate, or I don't want to say aggression, but to where that start to bottle up and you're upset, then that's the point where I shut down and I won't continue to communicate. You will shut me down. Like if you
I think
start getting loud and you start yelling and you start showing aggression, then I shut down because no, we're no longer communicating like adults. If you're screaming, if you're yelling, if you're showing aggression, there's nothing else I can do in this conversation. So I will shut down.
Go ahead,
So
Melanie.
usually, most men don't conduct themselves in that way, right? That's a small portion of men that conduct themselves in that manner. Most of the time, I think women tend to try to tone police men and tell them how to talk, tell them how they should be delivering something instead of usually reading the room. And half the time, women don't know when or when not to speak. Um, we're usually extremely combative. So I don't understand. It just seemed like a lot of the conversation was like him, 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 but women play a major role in a lot of the outcomes in the conversation.